Now we are moving into one of the highlights of this year's Tech Retory, and that is our Fireside chats. And right after that, two distinguished but brief speakers at the end of this opening ceremony. Now, opening Fireside chat, tech, trade, and tensions, the role of digital technologies in times of global power struggles we are in. Please use Slido. If we will have time, we will use opportunity to ask questions. That's the Slido. Use the QR code. Even if you are in Slido, probably you are in a session of innovations and technology, or maybe policy and strategy stage. Now, use the opening stage is the code, or just go to QR code and use that. Now, please welcome Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Latvia, Baiba Braže, also for the Fireside chat in the middle. And our moderator, presenter, speaker, founder of I Love Productions, Marjorie Payon. Marjorie, welcome to the stage.
So much. Thank you so much, Valdis. As always, and I will need your help, of course, by the end of this segment, because if we do have time, you'll have the opportunity to ask your questions to our distinguished guests here on stage. It's an honor to be with you this morning, actually, because we're going to tackle one of my favorite topics of all time. How can we envision tech and in terms of power when it comes to this context and times of global struggle? And to begin with, I'm kind of curious though, what keeps you up and awake at night? Is it all about the AI bubble probably going to burst us at some point? Is it about superintelligence and all the conversation we can have around that? Is it information used as a weapon, or is it the division within our own nations? Minister Braže.
Well, last night I slept very well after the...
I'm happy for you.
Three big deals, the EU 19th package, the sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil, and the Jas Gripens for Ukraine deal, I think, made for a very good night's sleep, finally. And that's a short answer. What keeps me up at night, that's the Russian war in Ukraine. Yeah. So we can discuss that also from this perspective here. But that is, in terms of tech, we see it on the battlefield, actually, how the AI autonomy, innovation, cyber, everything is used. And it depends for what the intention is. Russians use it for the warfare, for the aggression. Ukrainians use it for Article 51 of the UN Charter, self-defense. Yep. So it's no surprise we actually had the UN Security Council discussion on the use of AI and what type of use. So I think that is where we look, if you ask a dramatic question like that.
And thanks for answering, as always, Vice President Rakunen.
Yes, I also slept very well because I was in Riga, and I know, of course, that Latvia is very well prepared for different things, so it's good to be here. But it's really that if you look now our political priorities also in the European level, we have two clear priorities: security and competitiveness, and these are very much interlinked, as we know. So, and I see also when it comes to technological competitiveness that Europe is having everything what is needed to be very competitive in this field. We have excellent research and science. We have thousands of very promising and innovative startups. And of course, we have very strong basic industry in the European Union. And especially, I see that there's very strong linkage when it comes to defense and competitiveness. And Europe can be strong globally only if we are able to defend ourselves. And that's why it's so important that all member states are now investing heavily to defense industry. And I think it's also a great boost for our technological competitiveness because critical technologies, they are going very much hand in hand with the defense industry. So I very clearly see that in a couple of years, Europe will be much, much stronger than we were in last winter, for example.
Wonderful. Now, in the wake of major tech platforms getting closer and closer to governments in terms of power, of course, and the fact that we as a citizen do understand that we're not only users of technologies, but are digital citizens in a way. And the fact that, I mean, yesterday we were also on this very panel diving into the fact that 800 high profiles have signed the Future of Life Institute calls on superintelligence, trying to ask for a ban or prohibition of superintelligence and its development for the next few years. Well, I mean, my question is, the more we're entering a tech-driven democracy era, the more we do defy tech. Are we entering a new era now? And again, your title is definitely about tech sovereignty, but also democracy, Vice President.
Yes, and I see, of course, that our citizens, they are very much key and core of everything. So I always underline very much the importance of investing in education. So we have to have very educated citizens, that everybody should have good literacy, good digital skills, also media literacy, because we see that we are very much under attack and our democracies are under attack. And that's why we have to build up the resilience of our societies. And of course, our citizens, they are playing key role here, that our citizens, they should have also the tools to really analyze and critically think the information what they see in everyday world, in our online environment especially. But in the same time, of course, in the European Union, we will also want to make sure that also our technologies, for example, digital platforms, that they are respecting our rules and legislations. And I think we have very good digital rule book in place when we speak about Digital Service Act, Digital Markets Act, also AI Act, which is coming into force. There we have risk-based approach. So we see that most of the cases where we are using technology, there is no risk. But in the same time, we want to make sure also that in online world also, we are respecting our rules and legislation. So what is illegal in our societies, it's also illegal online. So we want to make sure that we have safe and democratic and fair environment also on online world. And that's why we have certain rules also in the place.
Yeah, well said, Vice President. I think we fully agree. And then, of course, there's the other part of what you asked, which is about, regulation. And is that enough? Is that not enough? How do we circle that square down to the individuals, their behavior, and how do we leverage the EU or other big regulators work with the big tech or with the scale to make sure that individuals are protected. But in the same time, what we really think currently is important when we go back to tech and trade is the work of deregulation that the Commission is doing. And that is something that for the tech industry, where everyone starts small, there's never a big sort of invention that starts big. It always starts small, inventive, experimentational. That the regulation does not delay, that there is possibility for that small, fast, and possibility to fail. So permissive attitude, so higher risk percentage, not punishing people for doing something wrong, letting that feel to be. And then also, of course, we are at a time of war, and we can say war in Ukraine is kinetic. The war against us is non-military, it's with sub-conventional means, cyber, disinformation, the sabotage activities, and so on and so forth. Just look at it. But at that time, we also have to have that ability to give the companies, the inventors, that financial support, that ability really to experiment and be successful in a very direct way. And that is where I think we are missing. And that's why also removing those barriers, but also not necessarily being ambitious about something huge, European champions, but actually allowing that base, that multiple scale of companies to experiment and get the chance to be successful is crucially important in our view.
If I do hear you well, what you're asking actually to the European Commission out there is to be a little more agile when it comes to regulating European companies?
I think it's national, European level, there are always the fashion word used to be guardrails, and how do we work within that? But again, it's that enabling environment for the innovation, and that's academic to private, that's defense civilian. It's really literally taking down those obstacles at a smaller scale where we allow the companies to grow and experiment while being in a safe environment. So that is also something. The big computing possibilities that the Commission is creating, that gives for smaller companies that safe space to develop. And that is, again, the issue is at a national level then. How do we use that opportunity?
Yeah, we see also clearly that Europe has to become much more, we have to become much more easier and faster and simpler for the businesses, and that's why Commission is very committed to simplify our rules, and all the commissioners are supposed to look our own sector, that how we can cut red tape and bureaucracy and how we can simplify the processes. And I'm currently working now with the digital rules, so on 19th of November I'm supposed to propose my package, digital simplification package, and we are very much focusing now in this package to cybersecurity rules, not downgrading them, but we have a lot of different reporting obligations there. So we are simplifying the things and making it easier for the businesses. And also we are looking our data rules, so we want to make it also easier to use data for innovations and AI. And we are also looking at the overlapping parts we have in different digital rules, but also with the other legislations, really to make it easier for the companies. Especially we are looking, of course, startups and SMEs, because they don't have the same resources to comply with the rules. Of course, the big tech, they have all the resources always, and it's not so difficult for them if there's a lot of regulation, but especially for small companies. But like the Minister said also, it's not only about the digital rules. Overall, we have to create more single market, because it's a problem that often we have too many different approaches in different member states, too many barriers in the European markets. And special problem for our startups and small companies is really access to finance, because we see that we have thousands of very promising startups. For example, when it comes to AI, according to our information, there's about 7,000 startups in the European Union who are training and developing AI. One obstacle for them has been really access to computing capacity, and that's why we are now investing together with member states to give also computing capacity for small companies. But then the second thing is really access to capital, and annually, quite same amount of startups are established in the European Union than in USA. But then when we look about the scale-ups, only 8% of the scale-ups are in the European Union and 60% in USA. So it very clearly tells that our startups, they are often moving to USA to scale up their businesses because of access to capital and access to markets. And here clearly we have to be much better.
And you were definitely referring to Mario Draghi during your keynote speech here on this very stage. Well, I mean, a year ago, Mario Draghi was trying to make the case for Europe to embrace investment and innovation, or basically perish or die. A year after, he definitely thinks we're still not there. So what kind of wake-up call are we waiting for?
I think that European Commission has delivered a lot during these first 10 months we have been in the office. But of course, it's not enough that we are making proposals, because then always the co-legislators, so European Parliament and member states, they have to agree, and the process is quite slow. So we would like to see, of course, a faster process.
That's one part of the beauty of Europe.
But everybody has to, of course, do our part. And it's not enough that we are acting in the European Union level, because often, of course, it's also member states and regions and even municipalities. For example, if we speak about permitting processes, for example, for the new investments, it can be very lengthy processes.
Minister Breger.
No, absolutely, I fully agree. And also that tradition of procurement, not allowing single source procurement at a smaller level. Because what you need for those SMEs is actually speed, the quick allocation, because that immediately relates to the scale-up, to the ability to really be the first to be successful. And there, actually, I would take lead from the leaders' declaration at NATO summit, which clearly calls for the more risk taking in not only defense industry per se, but actually the defense tech and everything around it. And looking at the lessons learned from the war in Ukraine, the speed and decentralized way how Ukrainians have been able to take on, adapt and use technology for the real success on the battlefield. Obviously, we have different rules. We are not at war, kinetic war. But I think there is something to be taken on between the EU-NATO in simplifying the really ability to take both decisions, but also award finances. We have an SME which was successful in EDF, and they got an award, you know, for development. It took a year for research and development. It's, and I'm not criticizing you, that's the way procedures are. Yeah. And it's just too slow. We don't have that time. We don't have that time. And nationally, we cannot always bridge that gap in that respect. But there, I would say, really is a more permissive work between the EU and NATO, between EU and national level, NATO and national level, on allowing this type of rapid advancement and rapid adoption is a key.
We do hear actually what you're saying here on keeping up with the pace of innovation and not slowing it with regulation. But still, let me dive on regulation for a quick second here with you, because is European digital regulation still effective at a time when an American administration defies the European Union to use it?
I think we have very robust and fair rule book when it comes to digital, and I think it's always important also to underline that we have same rules for everybody. So it's for the European companies, for Asian companies, for American companies, but we have more obligations for the big ones. Because they are also posing higher risks. So for example, in Digital Service Act, we have that kind of obligations, for example, that very large online platforms, which have more than 45 million users in the European Union, so it means that at least 10% of our citizens are using them, they have to all the time assess and mitigate the systematic risks what they are posing. For example, for our democracies, for our people's well-being, they have to protect minors, so there is obligations that we want to make sure that we have safe and fair environment also, because we know that technology is also posing risks.
But to be honest, over the summer when Ursula von der Leyen went to Washington and tried to make this deal with President Trump about the 15% of tariffs when it comes to commercial exchange in between the US and the EU, are you certain we didn't trade it off, one part of our digital regulation?
It was very clear from our side all the time in these trade negotiations that our digital rules, they are not part of the negotiations, because we, as European Union, our member states and European Parliament are very committed to enforce these rules. So they were not part of the negotiations. Of course, we know that why USA wanted to have this 15% tariff, it's that they think that they would have more jobs in USA, so they try to create more jobs to USA with these trade barriers. And in the European Union, we see that these tariffs or trade war, it's not benefiting anyone, but this is now the deal that we have with USA.
I agree, actually. It's not only the current US administration, the previous administration had the same objectives. They tried to achieve it with different means, with more sort of incentivizing companies moving to the US. So not so much restrictive on trade, but actually more subsidizing the sort of green, renewable, and so on and so forth. But it's not going to change. I mean, we have seen that throughout the last at least 4 or 5 US administrations, that big shift, that they don't want just to be the consumer and security provider, but they want to have more jobs in the US, long-term jobs, production industry, and so on and so forth. And in the same time, more responsibility on all the allies, but also on the partners in Indo-Pacific and around the world in investing in defense and security. And it's a fair point. Whether the means are right, then, the trade negotiations start, all the other sort of elements come in. And then, of course, within the EU, we all work towards figuring out what our interests are. So for Latvia, at least, that trade deal looks okay for now.
Well, sure. Go on.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting to see now when there is so much uncertainty in the global environment, and Europe is often seen very slowly and bureaucratic, like we are. We are too slowly and too bureaucratic. We want to change it. We want to be faster and simpler and easier for the businesses. But also Europe is seen as a reliable and trustworthy partner. So we can say that all the countries all over the world, they are very willing to cooperate with the European Union. And we see also that Europe can be a very attractive place for investments, because the industry and investors, they can trust to our rules. They know that the processes are slowly here, but in the same time, this is trustworthy environment for investments, because nothing is changing overnight in the European Union. Sometimes it's bad that it's not changing overnight, but because we have always certain democratic processes. And that's why it's also very important that we are taking care of our rule of law, for example, because it's also very important for the investments that the investors, they can trust to justice systems of different member states, that everybody is equal before the law, and always when they are investing to certain country, that they can also trust to the procedures there.
I would definitely agree with you that probably previous American administration were a little more shy at showing what the end game was when it came to fighting European regulation over tech companies. But yet, there's probably one shield we can use, it's sovereignty. So I'm kind of curious to learn what's your definition of any digital, industrial, economical sovereignty, and can we also agree on the fact it's not only a political type of perspective, but also a very effective business tool out there? Can we think about a Buy-European Act, for instance?
Why don't you speak about China?
If we are looking current situation in the European Union when it comes to technologies, 80% of our technologies is coming outside. So the higher tech is coming very much from the USA, and the lower tech is coming from China. And we see that it's not very realistic even to think that we could, do everything ourselves if now 80% is coming outside. But for us, it's very important that we are identifying all the critical fields where we have to have our own capacity, where it's too risky to be dependent on one country or one company. And that's what we are doing now, that we are investing to certain critical fields of technologies. And this is, of course, something that all the industries and public sectors are also doing. They are looking also what kind of services they are using and what kind of dependencies there is. Europe has been very open for global investments. And we see also that nowadays all these dependencies, they can be also weaponized against us. And that's why it's so important to build up the resilience and always make sure that we have always plan B or C if something is happening on our value chains. And we see also that Europe, we have a very good services also by European companies. For example, when we speak about technology and digital field. But often they are smaller companies, and those companies are not so visible in the European markets. But I see clearly that we should use more European preference, and that's why we are also now revising our public procurement rules. But already now, there's much opportunities for public sector, for example, to buy more European alternatives, and also for the industries. And I know that there's huge interest towards that. And for example, currently we are preparing our Cloud and AI Development Act. And when it comes, for example, to cloud services, there is already many European alternatives, but they are not so visible.
And we obviously all witnessed what happened with AWS in the US, but also affected the EU's application and internet sector over the past few days. If we do rely on one single cloud operator, things can go south pretty quickly.
Yes, and Latvia didn't suffer last summer when there was that outage among the airports. So we were okay. We have our solutions. But again, going back to sovereignty. So especially for smaller languages, for smaller countries like ours, whether Finland or Latvia. So how do we ensure in the time of tech development, in the time of AI, what is that? You know, and how does it relate overall to the countries, to the nations? So I think the use of our languages in the AI, and that's why we have been supporting Tilde so much, to have that language existing, to have that nation existing, we need to consciously support the use in the AI and modern technology. So that is one thing where it's not anymore about the books or papers or folk songs, but it's actually really about the tech and conscious leadership. Then the second element, obviously the European Union, it's also a territory. So physically in Schengen, okay, there are some, you know, crossings at certain times imposed for certain reasons, but overall it's a free travel territory. In terms of data and tech, it's not. The digital single market doesn't exist. The rules that SMEs, and we only have SMEs, we don't have what you would say at the global stage, you know, the huge companies. For them to compete in the European market, there are so many different regulations. And as I said, from procurement to operations to, I don't even speak about tax and so on and so forth. But also then, how do you measure success? and whether, you know, at some moment the offer from a big country in Asia to be successful is very interesting offers that they make to the companies. And if we don't have that offer in Europe, it will go somewhere else. Because they want to be successful. And then they become successful, but there is a risk in it. So look at Nexperia.
Can we turn that risk into opportunities?
Yes, because when it comes to this, that we don't have really single markets, so I think we have huge potential in our single market, and we should really remove the barriers between single market. But we know that different member states, for example, they have different labor laws and different taxation systems, and of course, it's creating problems for the companies who want to operate in a bigger area cross-border, and that's why we have very interesting idea and initiative now in the Commission side, so-called 28 regime. So we are preparing that kind of initiative that we could have 28 regime for these innovative companies who are operating in several member states, and they should have one taxation rules, one labor rules, one corporate legislation. And we are proposing to publish our idea and the initiative and legislation now in March. So we are working on that, and we hope that our member states will support the initiative also. So we would test that. What does it mean that if we could have that kind of 28 regime for innovative companies, really to operate cross-border without barriers in the European Union?
Well, that sounds quite like a test to me for the 28 member states here in Europe. Valdis, we do have one question, I think.
Yes, and of course that question is about speed of Europe. Yes, and literally it says by Imans, in some sectors Europe is a tech colony for US and China, and only 10% of Draghi's report has been implemented. What and how to change this trajectory? You've mentioned already, of course, we have many stages and many countries involved. Is it possible? What are next step tomorrow?
I would change the procurement. I think the big drag for all, both in the public sector, you know, when you have the regulation which is not permissive for risk. So you have the attitude from whoever awards contract tenders, also for small companies, applying the same rules as for big tenders.
So are you saying it's not about regulations, it's about our culture?
No, it's about the regulations, because if you have the state audits, you know, the EU Court of Auditors publishing their reports, or at a national level, our auditors then coming after, you know, civil servants or politicians awarding more permissive risk-free risk-enabling contracts at a, you know, single source, it will be it will be a scandal. It will be, if not a criminal case, it will be a scandal. So elaborating that what leaders agreed at NATO summit, that there is that more risk enabling environment, plus changing the procurement rules for smaller, medium-sized companies, really allowing them to experiment, fail, and then start again. And plus celebrating success in various ways is something that in the tech sector, I think there is no other way. What we changed, what works, what might be interesting also for other countries a few years back was actually the share options for the startups. And that is one thing that actually we have ever-growing startup community. But then again, we need to top it up with that ability to really enable them to scale up and succeed.
Thank you.
Yeah, there is not really one silver bullet to speed up the processes, but really 1 year ago when Mario Draghi was published his report, he was underlining this is now or never moment for Europe. And now I think it's even more now or never moment for Europe. So, because we are in a very this very important time where we are now, when we look at the global competition where we are and how security and technology and competitiveness, they are so strongly interlinked. So those countries who has the technological capacity in the future, they have very much power on economics and also in security. And that's why it's so important that we are really boosting the investments now. We have a lot of funding also in the European Union, but it's also about our culture. Our households, they have more than 30 trillion euros in the savings accounts in the banks. So the Europeans are, like we already talked earlier, we are not so willing to take often risks. And that's also that we are moving too slowly. Now when we look what's happening globally, we should be much faster and we should take more risks also.
Well, it's definitely a make or break type of question out there, but let me just add that by the time we're having this conversation here in Riga and diving into the speed of regulation, the way we can just simplify the way to make it, well, China is having its own meeting right now, and what they're doing here is getting a planification for the 5 years ahead. And what they're trying to aim by 2030 is to be a leader when it comes to every single part of technologies we've been diving into today. So
I think one thing also that we can look at is we have a lot of academic success. And the fact that, you know, there is some in academic press, there is China, you know, taking so many patents and so many patents. Actually, when you look at the detail, it's not exactly that, because the system of awarding patents and the competition and peer review in China is entirely different than it is in Europe or the US. But so whether in Europe or wider Europe, there's a lot of academic success. How do we use that for commercializing? And there are countries and places where it's more successful, but to serve also that success in technologies, to serve that success in pharmacy and elsewhere. So conscious enabling of transfer of innovation from science to private sector success. And again, that's not always easy. Also in defense civilian sector, not always easy, but you know, by creating those safe environments, by creating the ability to test, exercise in real life, that would work.
Yeah, but I see very much that this is also very good news that we have everything what is needed to be competitive, because we have excellent research and science that we know, and we have also thousands of innovative startups. We have very strong industrial bases in the European Union, and we have also money here, but now we have to really make sure that we are boosting the investments also, and we are also making business with our innovations, because too often it has happened that the innovations are made in Europe, but the other continents are making business of our innovations, so they are not entering to the markets here. And we have to make sure that we are changing that.
So the official statement is the time is now.
Time is now, and time is finished also from what I see.
Thank you.
But one thing that the Vice President said, I think it's also important for the Latvians here and the Baltic Nordics here, that Nordic-Baltic region is really the fastest and most innovative regions, both in EU and NATO. There is so much development happening, and when I look at the quantum community in our countries, Latvia, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and the scientists working together, and there is an excellence in quantum sensors, in encrypting, in key development. It's all there. So now, next stage, whether that goes into GPS-free targeting for the military, whether it goes in safe comms, it's all there. So it's about testing, enabling an environment, and supporting success.
Thank you, Minister.
Yeah, we see also that Baltic area is very much a center of different policies now. We see it in the security, of course, that these countries around Baltic Sea, they are very much in center. But also when we look technologies and digitalization, like Minister said, these countries, Nordics and Baltics, they are leading in digitalization and in technologies. And I also see that in the European level, it's important that these countries are also pushing more the whole European Union to go faster forward with the technologies and with the competitiveness. And I think also the security situation, it has been really tightening, I think, the networking around Nordics and Baltics. And I see that it's very good for our security and also for our competitiveness. So I'm also calling everybody to keep up the good speed and also to push whole European Union to move faster when it comes to technologies and digitalization.
Thank you, Vice President. And thank you, our moderator, Marjorie. Thank you.
Thank you so much.